Good evening, Unique Couples community. How's everyone doing this evening? I am Vito Patrick, one half of Vito and Linda Patrick of Unique Couples, and I want to welcome you to another Unique Couples Sunday Night Live. And we have a special guest who's in the house with us, Reverend Dr. Elvis Burrows. He is going to be introduced very shortly. We have a special guest in the house, and we're going to be in for a great time this evening as we are talking on the topic help. I'm a fatherless father. And we know that this month, June, is being dubbed as Men's Month. So last week, Sunday, we would have talked about the importance of men's health. And today, we're going to be talking about help. I'm a fatherless father. So go ahead and type in hashtag live squad. Let us know where you're watching from. Those of you that'll be watching the replay, go ahead and type in hashtag replay. It's great to have our community here this evening, and we're going to be in for a great time. Wives, if you are watching by yourself, make sure you go and get your husbands. And husbands, if you are watching, make sure you stay tuned as we're going to have a great time. We're going to be sharing some great nuggets with you. So, June is Men's Month, and we have a power packed, dynamic set of speakers for the month of June. So, you do not want to miss a Sunday evening Unique Couples Sunday Night Live. You don't want to miss it. Good evening, Dr. Burrows. How are you?
I'm doing well, Vito. Thank you so much for having me with you this evening on the show. And I really want to applaud and congratulate you and your wife for the fine work you're doing with couples. It is so much needed in our society when so many families are falling apart. So I want to say thanks right up front at the very outset. Thank you for having me today. It's a pleasure.
Thank you too, Dr. Burrows, for taking time out of your schedule for being here with us to share with the community. And we know that we're going to have a great time, and we're going to just go ahead and dive straight into our topic for today. And like I mentioned, it's help. I'm a fatherless father. Want to say hello to Tashana. Also want to say hello to Creative Arts, who's tuned in. So, Dr. Burrows, can you go ahead and tell our audience a little about who Dr. Elvis Burrows is?
Oh, wow. I'll try to make it as brief as I can. Well, presently, I am a husband of one wife, Stephanie.
Yes.
Are you familiar with her? I am a father of 6 children, all adults. Thank God for that. And I want to say I sympathize with those ones who have little children, but I want to encourage them that they grow up real quick and become adults. So 6 adult children. My wife and I, we have 2 granddaughters, 2 beautiful granddaughters who live in Nassau, so we connect often on FaceTime. I am the senior pastor at Central Zion Baptist Church in 8 Mile Rock. And so if someone out there looking for a church, we are open for business. Central Zion, 8 Mile Rock. I'm the senior pastor. I have also been recently elected as the president of the Zion United Baptist Convention. That's a consortium of churches spread across the Bahamian archipelago, primarily from the Baptist faith. And so I've recently been elected as the president of that group of churches. You may have heard of the Zion churches. We have about 20 of them in Grand Bahama. And so there's so much more I can say. I've been pastoring.
We did share your bio, so I know the viewing audience will also be able to get a lot of information from that as well, you know.
Right, exactly. So I don't want to go through all of that. My wife and I, we've been very involved in couples ministry in the last 15 years. But because of my pastoral duties, my denominational duties, we don't get to do it as much, but we do spend a considerable amount of time in counseling couples who are going through marital stresses, marital issues, preparing young couples for marriage, dealing with persons who are going through divorce issues, and just trying to build marriages face to face in the counseling setting. So we've done more of that in recent times than the setting that you guys are doing now. So again, I applaud you all. But my wife and I continue to work in another arena, trying to accomplish the same thing that you guys are trying to accomplish, just in a different setting.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. So, Dr. Burrows, so like I said earlier, we are talking about help. I'm a fatherless father. Not having a father doesn't mean you can be a great one. And I want you to tell our viewing audience, how important is having a father to a man who is about to be a father? Can he do it without one? Tell us a little about your story and how you dealt with your circumstances.
Well, I can go on from morning until night talking about it, but let me say at the very outset of answering your question, I want to applaud those children who were fortunate enough to have been brought up in a home with loving parents, particularly a loving dad. I don't want them ever to take that for granted. And the mere fact that a dad may not have been in the home doesn't necessarily mean that that person could not have been a good dad, because we know many dads who are not necessarily in the home, but they are still, involved with their children. So I would often say, Vito, that presence does not always mean absence. And absence from the home doesn't always mean present, because a dad may be present in the home, but yet not involved with the children. But in my particular case, I never knew my dad, unfortunately. I've never met him, never seen him, don't know him, was not told anything about him, don't know the circumstances by which I became a fatherless dad. My mother was a teenage mother. I know that much, but I don't know the circumstances that brought that about. But one of the things I do know, as you grow up, you would know that something is missing. Because I believe God designed us, God wired us, God put in us something that tells us that we need that connection with a dad. It's no accident that when God sent Jesus, he sent him into a home where there was a man. God himself is described as father. And so we have to conclude that fatherhood is an important aspect of a child's life. And so when that is missing, it affects every aspect of that child's development from the very formative years all through life, because something is missing. A dad is there to help, to guide, and to nurture and to model for that child, particularly, and you mentioned a boy. It doesn't matter how good a mother is, and I applaud the single mothers. I myself grew up with a single mother, and so I know the struggles they go through. I know all that they do on a regular basis. Some of them work 2 jobs and 3 jobs trying to take care of the children. And from time to time, I hear them say, I had to be the mother and the father. And I would say, no, you may have been a double mother, a really good mother, but a mother can never be a father. A woman can never teach a boy what only a man can teach that boy. A man is the one who models for a boy what a man should be. It's a man who teaches that boy how to be a man. A woman can never do that. And so as good as a mother may be, she just can't do that. So growing up without a father, it's a deficit. I can say that, and I'm not just talking about the physical provision. Yes, a man ought to provide for the children, whether financially, and pay the rent and buy the groceries and buy the clothes, but it goes far beyond that. A man is there to provide a standard and a basis and to create an atmosphere and an environment where that child can develop good values and a good belief system and develop in a way that helps to catapult them into the real world. It's not just providing for the child, it's preparing to launch them to become adults. And so when a dad is missing, that particular aspect is missing from the child's life.
Yes. So for someone who wants to become a father who did not grow up with a father, would there be any challenges?
You know, that's a very good question, and I would answer it in this way. One of the important things that a dad does for a child, one of his major and primary responsibilities is to model for that child what a dad should be like. The way, if he's married, the way he treats his wife or the child's mother is saying to the child, this is the way you ought to treat your mother. The way he treats the other children and that child, he's saying to the child, when you become a dad, when you become an adult, this is the way you treat the children. His attitude towards work, his ethics, his behavior, his actions, however he behaves as a worker, as an employee, he is saying to that child, here is what a good employee looks like. Here is how a man relates to his superiors, to his boss, the way he carries on in his business. If he's a business person, he is saying to that child, here is how a businessman behaves. Here is how a businessman transacts business. Here is how a person of character and integrity looks like. And so when that is missing, it does handicap the child to a certain degree. Now, having said that, it does not give me or anyone an excuse to live a low life. And so when we did not have that model at home, as I didn't have, but mind you, let me take that back. I did have a loving granddad. I did have uncles. I had an uncle who was a pastor, who was a man of character, who was a man of integrity, and I watched him. So I would say to other men or young boys who don't have a father in the home, look for another man who you admire. It may be your coach at school, and sports, do a lot for young people, because there are some coaches who understand that some boys gravitate to sports because they're looking for connection. They're looking for a sense of belonging. Yeah. And that's the same reason why boys join gangs and join other unhealthy associations. So I would say to the young boy to look for another man who seems to be trying to raise his children in a way that's healthy. And so when you don't have in the home what you need, it's best to go and look for it elsewhere. And there were other men in my life, as I grew up, who I look at. My father-in-law was a great dad. I watched the way he treated his wife. I watched the way he treated his children. I watched the way he conducted business. And so even though you may not say to the person, you watch someone, you watch the way they behave, you watch the way they conduct themselves. My pastor, Reverend Peter Pinder, and of course my father-in-law was Reverend Haywood Cooper. He passed away about roughly a year ago, but he was one such person who I emulated close up and from a distance. My pastor, Reverend Peter Pinder, he was someone who I watched the way he conducted himself, the way he carried himself with his wife and his children. And there are others I could go and name. Yeah. My brother-in-law, Allison Pinder, Paxton, my brother-in-law. And so I watch the way they were a bit older than I am, but I watched the way they related to their wives, their children. And I said, there's something right about this. Mm-hmm. I didn't have that in my home. So if you don't have something that you need, go out and look for it.
Go and look for it, yes.
Go and look for it. And another thing too, as I grew and mature, I got into reading. I read books. I watched videotapes. My wife and I, we went to seminars. I had to learn a lot on my own because I was determined, Vito, that I wanted to be a dad to my children because I realized that something was missing. And I did not have that. And I wanted my children to have what I did not have. And that was the involvement of a dad who was there, not just physically, but was there emotionally, was there to provide guidance and godly counsel and to provide a sense of presence. And that is what I wanted for my own children. And so whatever it took, I went and tried to harness those skills that, I didn't get from modeling because I did not have a dad in my home.
Excellent points, Dr. Burroughs. And you kind of just went into another point that I wanted to bring up. So there are a lot of sayings about men who have no fathers. In fact, most of society ills are blamed on men who are fatherless. What can you say about this popular belief?
Well, I would say this, Vito, there has been a tremendous amount of research done on adult men and I guess teenage boys and young adult boys who get themselves into trouble from time to time. And so they've done a tremendous amount of research. I myself, during my days in seminary, have also done research in those areas. And there is a correlation. There is a connection between some of society ills and persons who did not have a father. Because what they're saying is that, let me back up a bit. See, when there is a dad in the home who is involved, that one of the responsibilities of that dad, Vito, is in addition to modeling what he wants that child to emulate, he's also someone who brings a sense of discipline. And so he's there to help to discipline those children and to steer them in a way that they would go. And now, mind you, there are many good parents who I believe did their part, steered the children in ways they ought to go, but yet the children find themselves in problems. So I'm not saying because a child gets into a problem, the parents were bad parents. That's not the point. But there's an overwhelming amount of stats and research that would suggest that there is some relationship, some correlation between those who get into trouble and not having a dad. But as I said, we can't blame all of society's problem on not having a dad. I don't think that's fair, because there comes a time when you and I and whomever it is, we must take responsibility for our actions. We must come to a place where we realize that we could no longer blame others for our problems. We have to take ownership for it. And I see so much of that going on in our country where we are not willing to take ownership, but we are quick to project blame onto others and not take ownership for our own situations. And you see, one of the things that a dad does in the home, he teaches a child responsibility and to take ownership for things that they should have done or left undone. And so a father helps to teach a child that, and not to blame everybody else for his or her problem. You get a bad grade in school, and what you do, you blame the teacher. No. Did you study? Did you apply yourself? Or did you spend all the time on your cell phone? So a dad is there to help to teach that child what it means to take responsibility, what it means to take ownership for your own problems, for your own failures, for your own faults, and to help that child to get back on track. When the child falls down, a dad is there to say, hey, get up. You can do this. So his primary one of his primary responsibilities is to encourage that child. And so there are many children who grow up without that sense of encouragement, without that push. And when they don't have that connection and closeness and communication with their dad or with parents, they gravitate towards gang and other unhealthy associations, and they find themselves in trouble. So that's a fact, and it does have a bearing on how some children turn out, unfortunately.
Yeah, a lot of great information, but like Dr. Burrows said, at some point, the individual have to be responsible for the actions that they did.
Mhm.
They have to be responsible. They have to take ownership of those responsibilities.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Burrows, is having a father or being a father the goal? Or does it involve more than a physical body in name only?
You know, anyone could, I guess, have a child. You only need an egg and a sperm, I guess,
Yes.
a male and a female in the right atmosphere, and anyone can have a child, but not anyone can be a dad. A dad connotes a relationship. It's a relationship. In the story when Jesus was being baptized and the Holy Spirit descended upon him, and the voice from heaven came, said, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." God was demonstrating that there is a relationship between father and son. And unfortunately, there are so many homes where that relationship does not exist. Does not exist. Yes, you may have been the someone, I heard someone said, the sperm donor, and that's about it. But where is the relationship? Where is a man with a presence, someone who's there to coach that child, to push that child along, someone to teach that child the way that God intends for that child to grow up, someone who is there to push that child towards destiny, to push that child to accomplishing his or her goals, to recognize how God has gifted them, and to help that child to recognize the gifts that God has given to him or her, and to help that child to harness those gifts and to develop those gifts. A dad's, one of his responsibilities is to watch that child as he or she grows, and to see how God has gifted them, and to say, you know what? God has gifted this child with a voice that he or she can sing. And then the dad, he uses his resources to channel it into an area that helps that child to develop the gifts that God has given to them. And Vito, it's unfortunate sometimes, but we want the children sometime, or the child, to be someone in our image, someone that we want them to be. But a father's responsibility is to watch that child as he or she grows, and to see how they are gifted, and to channel those gifts, to nurture those gifts, I would say, fan the flames, and to help them develop to become not what you want them to become, but help them to become how you see God has gifted them. You may be an attorney, but God may have gifted the child to be an evangelist, a minister, or a politician, or some other craftsman. So look to see where that child is gifted. Look at the skills. You may have been a good tennis player, and you say, "Oh, I want my son to play tennis," but he may be 6'2", and God has gifted him to dunk balls.
Play basketball, yes.
Basketball, or give him a good arm that he can throw a 90-mile-per-hour baseball. So a dad's responsibility is to see where God has gifted that child, and help that child to walk in purpose, and to accomplish his God-given destiny. That's a dad's responsibility. And I don't want the mothers to throw rocks at me, because there are some mothers who are doing a fantastic job. They have to fill in the gaps. They have to make up for where the man may be lacking. But I say to the mother again, I applaud you all for what you do, but a boy needs a dad. And maybe you have this question to throw at me, but let me preface it even right now, there are some mothers who do the boys, who do the children a great disfavor, especially when there may have been a divorce, a breakup, a single mother who may have had a child out of wedlock or before they were married, and the relationship with the man no longer exists. And to punish the man, they withhold the children.
Yes.
Or deny the man a relationship with the child. I want to say this, that is so wrong, because I know, Vito, of many men who want a relationship with the children, but the mother, because she is hurt, because she does not any longer have that relationship with the man, she withholds or deny the man a relationship. Look, you may divorce your wife, you may divorce your husband, but you can never divorce your children. And as a woman, you ought to encourage your children, your child, the father of your child, and do all you can to make sure that child has a relationship with his dad, because it is so important. And I know of men today who are still wandering in the wilderness, trying to find themselves because they did not get from a man what they ought to have gotten when they were growing up. A man is one who teaches a boy how to be a man through modeling and through other aspects of his everyday living.
Yes, lot of excellent points you're mentioning, Dr. Burroughs, and men play a very important role. And like you would have said, even if the husband and the wife are divorced or separated or break up, or if you would have had a child before you was married, you shouldn't keep the father from that child. You want to make sure that father is involved in that child's life. That is very, very important. I want to say hello to Franklin, Gia, Alphany, Kathy. For those of you who have just tuned in, we are here on Unique Couples Sunday Night Live. I am here with a special guest, Reverend Dr. Elvis Burrows. We are talking about help. I'm a fatherless father. And a few nuggets what Dr. Burrows dropped on us. He mentioned that as the father, you want to watch the child and see how he grows. He also talks about helping them to become who God gifted them to be. So a father would look at all of these things as well. So we are here this evening with Reverend Dr. Elvis Burrows. So Dr. Burrows, and I know you probably touched on this a bit earlier, right? But what role can other men, the church, and society play in helping boys become men who don't have fathers in their lives?
Excellent question. I would often mention in our church, and I believe I mentioned it today, the Bible says, train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he's old, he should not depart from it. A great proverb from the great wise Solomon, I think it was. He said, what he says, train up a child. It never says train up your child. And so I stretch that interpretation a bit to mean that as a Christian man, I have a responsibility to assist in the training of other children. Because if you know, the Bible does say that we are to look out for the fatherless and the orphans and the widows. So what if there are some orphans in our congregation whose father may be in prison for a long time? Some folks whose dad may have died, early, through tragic situations. No fault of their own. It could happen to any one of us. But for the grace of God, you and I are here and have been able to, and others who were able to see their children grow up to be young adults, but for the grace of God. And so, as the church, I feel, we have a responsibility to the orphans. And where there are young boys in our congregation, we all, and girls, we are there to make sure that they get some sense of what it means to have that father figure, to have someone who demonstrates for them care and concern and love and protection. See, one of the things that a man provides in a home is protection. I guarantee you, a young man will think twice of fooling with your daughter or taking advantage of your daughter if there's a man in that home. When there's no man in that home, that is when, abuse is more likely from outsiders. But if they know a man is in that home, even the Bible says what? If you go into a home, what you have to do? He said, bind what? Bind the strong man.
Yeah.
You have to confront that man. And so if a man is in that home, anyone comes to that home to molest the wife or the children, he has to go through that man. And so when a man is not there, it leaves the children exposed. It leaves them handicapped to a certain degree. So the church has a responsibility, and that is why we ought to have programs, men's ministry. And I applaud the Dudleys and the others who have a bigger ministry to boys, and Darren, Dudley and Reverend Darren and the rest of those who have ministries to that level. But each one of us, should look around our churches and see where the void is, and see which young man needs, encouragement, which young man needs the involvement of a dad. Now, you can't provide everything, but sometimes just a pat on the back, sometimes just showing up to that kid's baseball game or that, whichever sports he or she is involved with, can go a very, very long way. Because I know growing up as a kid, could you imagine? I wrote in my book, and I did write a book. There's the title of the book, Daddy, Please Don't Go. And I will say a little bit more about it as we go. I wrote this book, and chapter 5 deals much about my personal life with not having a father. But I remember, and I will use this example, I remember growing up, I loved the game of softball. And I needed a glove. Every young boy on the team had their own glove. And, when we would change sides, go into bat or go back to the field, I always had to borrow a glove. And all the other boys had a glove. And, one day I said, man, if I had a dad, maybe he would have bought me a glove and I would have my own gloves. And some of the boys had, the gloves came in pretty colors back then. It was blue gloves and red gloves, and the blue one looked so good. I said, man, I wish I had a blue glove, and maybe if I had a dad, he would buy me a blue glove. But I know my mother could not have afforded one because she was living on minimum income. There were 6 of us, so I dare not even ask her to buy a glove. She had to buy bread and other basic necessities. And so just to go without some time reminds you that when I was done with school, I thought I was college material, but I did not have the funds to get started. And I said, boy, if I had a dad, maybe he would have been able to pay the first semester fees. I mean, I don't know that for a fact, but they are the things that came through my mind as I saw others went. I said, boy, if I had a dad, maybe he would have the funds to pay those first fees. And see, that's another responsibility of a dad. He is to educate his children. He is to prepare them for life. Look, we are not just dad for the kids, for the children. We are dads. Well, let me say it another way. We are not preparing children. We are preparing adults.
Yes.
And what we do in the formative years of a child can very much determine what kind of adults we are creating. And so I say to a father there, as you father your children today, you can't think of them just as children today. Think of what kind of adults do you want that child to be. If you don't teach them the value of hard work, they grow up to be lazy. They grow up to with a sense of entitlement that this country owes them something, that someone else owes them, the politicians or somebody else. No one owes you anything. And so we are to teach them the value of hard work, the ethics of work, teach them responsibility in the home, give them chores to do. You can't do everything for them. And so there's so much a dad does,
Yes,
but
dads have a great responsibility.
it's all through life, because now my children are adults, but I am just as involved with them, but the relationship is different. I am no longer telling them what to do, but I am still coaching, I'm still guiding, I'm still
Giving advice.
counseling. I always say to them, look, I'm your free consultant. I say, you know what you have to pay for my consultancy if I send you a bill, you know?
Exactly.
And so the relationship changes, the role changes, but you never cease to be involved with your children. It's until death do you part.
Yes.
And I saw that with my father-in-law and my wife and my in-laws. He was involved all through life. He's not there telling us what to do, but he's still giving his views. We still bouncing things of him. My children now, they bounce things of me and, Daddy, what you think of this? My son will call from Nassau, from the US, Daddy, what you think of this or that? Mind you, I wish they would take my advice a little more, but nevertheless, they have a mind of their own, but we interact in that way at this stage of life. So a dad never ceases to be a dad. But the thing I want to say, Vito, to a dad, you are not preparing children. You are working with children, preparing them to be the adults of the future. And the kind of adults you want will determine the way you relate to your children today and as they move into young adult, youth and young adult life.
All right. Yeah. So men, we are preparing our kids to become adults. We have a great responsibility. And even when they become adults, we still can give them wise counsel. They can still throw things at us so we can give them ideas and suggestions. Like Dr. Burroughs said, they may not take your advice all the time, but at least you still have that communication going on. You are still in tune with them. You are still in sync with them. And that is excellent. And that is how you want it. You want to keep that relationship going with your kids. And like Dr. Burroughs said, until death do you part. So thank you for those great points, Dr. Burroughs. Many are walking around hurt because of an absent, unknown, or uncaring father. What advice would you give them?
You hit the nail on the head. And, as a counselor, when my wife and I, we do conjoint counseling many times, quite often as we work with couples. And one of the things the model of counseling I use many times pushes me back to look at family relationships, because whether we realize it or not, all of us came from a family culture that had an impact on us. And the type of family we came from in a great way determined the kind of adults we become. We can't divorce ourselves from our family of origin, and that's a fact. And I do know many men who are still struggling with the fact that they did not grow up with a dad. But you know what they struggle with? They struggle with a sense of identity, number one. They struggle with a sense of unforgiveness. They struggle with a sense of hurt and pain of not having that relationship. You may not believe it, but I never really talked about my situation until late in life, because no one never engaged me. No one never sat down and asked me, well, how is it? No one had this conversation that you and I are having now. It wasn't until I went to seminary. I was in the 30s, and I remember this gentleman. His name was Dr. Ted Hodge. I could see his face. He was the chief chaplain at Baptist East Hospital in Louisville, Kentucky. And you know what he said to me? He said to me, look, he said, Elvis, if you want to be a good counselor, you must first confront your own issues before you are able to confront other people's issues. He said, you have to come to grips with your problems before you're ready to deal with other people's problem. And then he engaged me, and we talked about my growing up without a dad, my absent dad, how that impacted me, how that affected me. And Vito, believe it or not, that was I would call the prerequisite for putting me in a different place. After that, I became free to talk about it. It didn't bother me anymore. It was like, okay, that's behind me. I had nothing to do with it. It was not my fault. There has to be a place where you forgive yourself, because we can blame ourselves and say, hey, boy, I must have been a bad person, that my dad didn't want me. Something must have been wrong with me. Maybe my head was picky, or my nose was too big, or I wasn't handsome enough. I wasn't pretty enough. Must have been something wrong with me, why my dad deserted me. It's nothing to do with you. There may be a man out there, a woman out there who may be thinking that, beating themselves up. They are into adulthood. They are married. They are not relating to their spouses in a healthy way, because what? They're still beating themselves up. They're still holding on to unforgiveness. You may have to release that dad, release the pain, release him, let him go. It's nothing you would have done if your dad was not involved in your early life. That's on him. It's not on you.
Yes.
As painful as it may be, it comes a place where we have to release that to God, ask God to heal us, release the person through the act of forgiveness. And forgiveness most times, forgiveness is a process. It's not a 1 minute thing, a 1 day thing. It's a process, where healing must take place. Forgiveness may be instantaneous, but healing takes a little longer. And so you may need time to heal, but it begins with acknowledging that this has happened. I didn't cause it to happen. It's nothing I would have done to make it happen. Now I must release the person and go on to forgiving myself, forgiving them, so that I can become a whole person again, and to be a whole person for my spouse, for my children. If you don't get to that point, you can easily project those feelings onto your spouse. You can project those feelings onto your children, and you can handicap an otherwise good relationship. I thank God that I believe I have gotten beyond that, but it took a long time. It took internal work. It took just a whole lot. The grace of God to get through it. It was not easy, because when you grow up without a dad, it creates a sense of shame, because you think something is wrong with you. And it can affect your self-esteem. It can affect your self-worth. And so you have to understand who you are in Christ and do your best to move beyond that. Otherwise, you shackle yourself and keep yourself hostage, and you can never become that good dad to your children that you can otherwise become.
Excellent advice. Excellent advice what Dr. Burroughs is giving us. So if there is some absent father who isn't there, there is some absent father who isn't there, unknown or uncaring father, Dr. Burroughs would have given you some advice in terms of what you had to do. So excellent advice, Dr. Burroughs. And as we are about to bring this conversation to an end, as we're about to wrap up, how did growing up without a dad impact your marriage, Dr. Burroughs?
Well, I believe my wife is listening somehow, so I have to be careful what I say. If you ask her, I'm sure she would have have a different take on it. But when a boy grows up in a home where there is not a marital model, I would say, there's not a husband, there's not a wife, not a mom, maybe a mother, not a dad, maybe a dad, not a mother. One of the things that a couple does for children is to model for them what that marriage should look like. I did not have that model. And so I had to grapple and try to figure out on my own what that model should look like. I did not have that. Yes, I saw my grandparents who were married and for a little bit, but that as I look back now, that was not sufficient.
It
I
wasn't enough
realized,
time.
right, and they were in it until death do them part. But when
Yes.
my grandmother died, I was 12 years old, so I didn't see much of that. But the point I'm trying to make, growing up in a home where a mother and a father is, wife and a husband, the child gets to see how that man treats that wife, how that man relates to his wife, how he speaks to her, how he treats her, whether it is with money, with disciplining the children, with being a good model in that society, going to church, conducting business. I did not have that. So as I said earlier, I had to learn some things on my own. I had to watch some other folks who I believe was getting it right. And so I had to struggle for a while. And in those early days, I really thank God for my pastor, Peter and Joyce, who got me and my wife into couples ministry. And so at a very early stage, my wife and I, we attended marriage conferences. We went to marriage retreats. We watched videos. We read books. If you want to come, I'm sitting in my library at home now. If you want to come in my library at home, about 80%, I would say, well, maybe 75% of my books, and I have a lot of books, about 75% of my books are books on marriage and family. Well, that was the area of my study, so that goes without saying. But
Yes.
anytime I end up in a bookstore, I would often gravitate to the marriage and family section.
Right.
I would just gravitate to that, and so I realized that is where my ministry was. But not having that model was a little was a disadvantage, and so I had to learn. I just had to learn by watching others who I thought had it together, and of course, as I read the Bible and I saw what the Word of God says as it relates to a husband, love your wife as Christ loves the church. Father, do not provoke your children to wrath. Don't embitter them. Don't cause them to get mad at you, but to bring them up in a way that glorifies God, in a way that honors God. And so I had to draw from all those different sources and resources in order to help me to become the husband that I am. Have I arrived yet? I don't think so. I'm still learning how to be a good husband at this phase of life, because as you know, and let me warn the young guys, so at every phase of life, there's a different wife.
Yes.
You have to learn her at every phase of life. So I am still adjusting after 39 years, to the wife of my youth, who I'm looking forward to spending the rest of my life with. I can't imagine life without her. But there's an ongoing learning process. Live with her in an understanding way. So I had to learn. I had to watch others, and I'm continuing to do that. And have I made it yet? No. But am I further ahead than where I've started? Yes.
Yes. All right. And Dr. Burrows, so one of the things that we teach here on Unique Couples is that marriage is work. Just like how we go on our jobs from Monday to Friday and we go to work, you have to do the same in marriage. And just like how you would have mentioned how not having a father, how did that impact your marriage? Well, like you said, you would have read books, you would have done different things, and you continue to put that work into your marriage. And that's one of the things that we always want to teach persons to do. You have to continuously put the work in your marriage. Like you said, you have been married 39 years. I think this year is going to make 40, right?
Yes, sir. 40
yes,
years.
40. So
40 years.
obviously you are still putting in the work in your marriage, even into the 40th year. So marriage is work, and that's what we want folks to realize. You have to put the work in your marriage. We have a question that came in. What should one do when an absent father shows up after you become grown and wants a relationship now that he sees you taking care of things?
That happens in real life, and I know of situations where it happened. I would say this much. You can never regain the same kind of a relationship with a dad who wasn't there all through life at a later stage of life. You may cultivate a relationship, but it will be at a different level. It will not be the same because what you lost in those formative years, you can never regain that anymore. That's lost forever. I heard someone said before when that happened, they said to the person, you can develop a relationship with your grandchildren, but as far as a relationship with me is concerned, that has been lost. We can have a civil relationship, but not a father-son, father-daughter relationship. But I am willing to help you to have one with your grandchildren. But as far as I'm concerned, the kind of relationship you may want, that can no longer happen. Do you be rude? No. You may still be angry. Yeah, but you may have to deal with that, but don't try to recreate something that has been lost forever. But imagine my dad showing up now after all these years, and I'm going to say, "Oh, hi, Dad. It's good to see you." I mean, I think that's hypocritical on my part, but that doesn't mean that you have to carry around unforgiveness and resentment and anger with you anymore. That is why we have to get to a point where we release that stuff. So if he does show up, it's no longer a barrier to your being kind and being loving and being caring, even if you need to be caring. But to say we have a father-daughter, father-son relationship, I don't think it can happen, especially if the years are far removed. You know, if it might have been maybe 4 or 5 years, you hadn't seen him or heard from him maybe, but 20 years, 25 years, the relationship can't be the same anymore. You can have a relationship, but you would have to define what that looks like.
Yes. And like you would have said earlier, you want to release the person through forgiveness.
Yes.
You want to heal.
You want to heal. And you're not healing for them. You're healing for you. It's about, the healing is primarily for you because you have no control over what the other person does. You have to heal so you can go on to be a complete person and one who can relate to your children or child or children and spouse if one is there, or even others in a work context, in a church context, so that you can be a fully functioning adult with no baggage, no hangups, and no more barriers and obstacles to hold you back and to block your forward movement. You heal for you.
Yep. Yes, excellent answer to that question, Dr. Burroughs. So, Dr. Burroughs, tell us more about your book and also tell our viewing audience how they can connect with you online as we bring this conversation to an end.
Well, thank you for giving me this opportunity again, Vito. I appreciate it. I released this book last year. I don't know if this is coincidental or what, but I have a feeling it was on June, I think 11th last year, when I released this book. It was it was the Sunday before Father's Day. So exactly a year ago, I released this book. So this is divinely orchestrated. The book is called Daddy, Please Don't Go. And it's a book that chronicles, as I said, my life story, growing up without a dad, but also giving ideas and suggestions how a person can become a better dad. And I use some research in the book, and one of the chapters is Understanding Fatherhood, how homes become fatherless. And my chapter 5 was it just didn't feel right, my personal experience. And I did some research where it says Daddy left us, the adult children speak. I interviewed some adult children, and I know you talked about that, the impact of dads leaving. The fatherless child got married. I talked to some married folks who married fatherless men, and some folks who are married to fatherless women. So I talk some of those, but at the last 2 chapters, I talk about time to move on, releasing the pain. And that's where I talk about forgiveness and giving up on your rights to get even, giving up on the resentment and the hurt and the pain, releasing it to God so you can move on and become that fully functioning adult. And I talk about breaking the curse, reaching beyond ourselves. And that's where I talk about how the church and others can become involved and how you can get involved in helping others who may be going through the same thing. So the book is on sale at my church, Central Zion in 8 Mile Rock. It's at my office on Queens Highway, Precious Acres. And my email is eburrows01@msn.com. And so at any one of those places, we can get the book. And as I said, I believe it's a well-written book. And it really gives a tremendous amount of ideas on how you can become a better dad, how you can improve on it, because we are all still learning how to be a dad, because even after the children are grown, as I said, you will continue to be a dad. That's my email, eburrows01@msn.com. As I said, my office is in the Precious Acres complex on Queens Highway at our church in 8 Mile Rock, Central Zion Baptist Church. We can get the book at any time.
Okay, so there you have it. Sorry, go ahead, Dr. Burroughs.
No, that was it.
Okay, so there you have it, folks. You saw the email on how you can reach Dr. Burroughs, and he also mentioned you can get his book at his Precious Acres complex, and that's on Queens Highway here in Freeport, Grand Bahama in the Bahamas. So those are ways where you can connect with Dr. Burroughs.
I just want to add too, Vito, that the book is also on sale at Bellevue Business Depot on Queens Highway. I just remember that.
Okay, awesome. It's also at Bellevue Business Depot.
On Queens Highway, yes. The book is also on sale there. And I think it will provide could be a valuable resource for those who are in men's ministry, those who are young fathers particularly, and for those who are wanting to be a good dad or a better dad. Not saying that you're a bad dad, but just wanted to become a better father to your children. And that's the main thing about it, because the children grew up real quickly, and before you know it, you don't have the same influence anymore over them as you may have in those very early and formative years.
Yes. So we want to thank Dr. Burroughs for taking time out of his schedule to be with us here on Unique Couples Sunday Night Live. We had a great time on the information that was shared, and we spoke on the topic, Help, I'm a Fatherless Father. Lots of information was shared, so you want to make sure, if you didn't catch it from the beginning, go ahead and watch it from the beginning. Lots of information, and you can always come back here on Unique Couples YouTube channel so you can watch it. If you haven't subscribed to the Unique Couples YouTube channel, you want to go ahead and click on that subscribe button, and then you want to make sure to turn on that notification bell. So every time we go live here at Unique Couples, you will be notified. So make sure you subscribe to the Unique Couples YouTube channel. We also want to thank our sponsors for making this program possible this evening. So we want to thank our sponsors. Watch this video.
At Wright's Enterprise, our slogan is Dreams on Wheels. Let us customize a trailer to accommodate your business's needs. From clothing and apparel, shoes and accessories, to hair and nails, we are the perfect choice for your mobile business. Contact 646-8464 for more info and follow us on IG at Wrights_Enterprise242.
Yes, we also want to thank our sponsors, the Nail Lab Creation. You want to go ahead and contact Anna 439-0523, the Nail Lab Creation. We also want to thank Hair the Players. You can contact Doris at Hair the Players at 351-1962. And then we want to thank Style Me Pretty, Shadra. I want to thank Style Me Pretty. You can contact her at 441-7977. So we want to thank our sponsors for making it possible for us to have this program here this evening. Also, we want you to join the conversations taking place on all things marriage and family in our free How to Strengthen Your Marriage Facebook group, and sign up to receive our free 7 days of Loving Your Spouse tracker. So the link is in the description and in the comments. So you want to make sure you sign up for that. And if you haven't joined the How to Strengthen Your Marriage Facebook group, you also want to go ahead and join the How to Strengthen Your Marriage Facebook group. Also, want to have those hard conversations? Well, register today to join our upcoming Couples Connect Communicate to Elevate workshop. You want to join that workshop? So go ahead and type in hashtag workshop in the chat so you can be a part of the Couples Connect Communicate to Elevate workshop. And we would have, and communication is very vital in marriage. So you want to make sure that you know how to communicate with your spouse. So be a part of the Couples Connect Communication workshop. So go ahead and register for that so you can be a part of that awesome workshop. And that's going to be happening on July the 5th. So register for the Couples Connect Communicate to Elevate workshop. The link is right there. So go ahead and register for that. So we just want to thank our sponsors for making this program possible today. We also want to thank Dr. Burroughs again, like I said, for taking time out of his schedule to be with us. We had fun sharing with our community this evening. Here at Unique Couples, we are building stronger couples, healthier marriages, and happier families. We love you guys. Have a great evening and see you tomorrow in the How to Strengthen Your Marriage Facebook group. And then we're going to be back here again next week, Sunday, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on the Unique Couples YouTube channel. Have a great evening. Love you guys. Bye.
Bye. Blessings.